Number 10. Toyota GT-R Supra Manual Edition. Go ahead and say it. The Supra, really? Hasn't that been around for a while? You're not wrong. The GT-R Supra has been part of the conversation for several years now, and it has always been a capable, genuinely exciting machine. But for 2026, Toyota did something that most manufacturers simply would not have the courage to do. They went back to the drawing board, questioned every assumption, and came back with a version of the Supra that feels less like a refresh and more like a proper reimagining. The engineers tackled the suspension tuning with fresh eyes, dialing in a setup that is more communicative and better balanced through high-speed corners. They fitted a limited slip differential that actually does what a limited slip differential is supposed to do, something enthusiasts had quietly grumbled about on earlier iterations. They stripped out approximately 80 pounds of mass from the chassis, which on a car of this size is a genuinely meaningful reduction. And then, in a move that is almost rebellious by modern standards, they kept the 6-speed manual gearbox. Think about what that means in 2026. We live in a world where dual-clutch transmissions shift faster than any human could manage, where paddle shifters have replaced 3 pedals in almost every performance car on the market, and where automotive marketing departments love to remind you that the computer always knows better. Against all of that noise, Toyota planted its flag and said, "You're going to roll your own gears, and you're going to enjoy every single second of it." At around $58,000, the GT-R Supra Manual Edition is the most accessible car on this entire list, and that accessibility is part of what makes it so special. This is not a garage queen. This is not a car you trailer to track days and keep wrapped in cotton wool the rest of the time. This is a car you drive to work on a Tuesday, take for a spirited run on a winding road on Saturday morning, and still grin about by Sunday evening. It is not the fastest machine on this countdown. It will not win a straight-line battle against half the cars we are about to discuss. But for raw, unfiltered driving joy per dollar spent, the GT-R Supra Manual Edition might be the single best value proposition on the entire list. Number 9. BMW M4 CSL. BMW's recent history is a complicated story. There have been genuine triumphs and there have been, let's be diplomatic about it, interesting creative decisions. The design language of certain recent models sparked debates that are still ongoing in automotive circles. The brand has been navigating a turbulent transition, trying to serve multiple audiences while staying true to an M division heritage that was built on a very specific promise: pure, driver-focused performance above everything else. The M4 CSL is BMW remembering exactly who it is. Beneath that relatively compact, almost understated exterior lives the S58 twin-turbocharged inline-6 engine, and in CS specification it produces just north of 500 horsepower. Now feed that power into a car that weighs under 3,500 pounds, add a carbon fiber roof to drop the center of gravity, bolt on carbon ceramic brakes that bite with surgical precision, and tune the entire chassis on the Nürburgring Nordschleife, as BMW claims this one was, and you get something that feels almost dishonestly capable for its size. Here is the thing you need to understand about the M4 CSL before you consider buying one. This is not a comfortable, long-distance touring machine. It is not the car you take on a romantic weekend getaway, cruising gently through scenic countryside. This car has a personality, and that personality is angry. It wants to be pushed. It rewards commitment and punishes hesitation. It is the car you take to a track day specifically to scare yourself a little, to find the limit, to come back to the paddock with slightly wider eyes than when you left. At approximately $95,000, it represents serious money for what is technically a 2 Series. But the moment you string together a proper set of corners, the moment you feel that rear end rotate and then catch, the sticker price becomes completely irrelevant. The only number you'll be thinking about is the one on your lap timer. Number 8. Chevrolet Corvette ZR1. Chevrolet Corvette. Read that sentence again, let it fully absorb, and then appreciate the magnitude of what General Motors has actually achieved here. The LT7 twin-turbocharged V8, a flat plane crank design that represents a significant departure from traditional American V8 architecture, is, in the opinion of many who have heard it run, one of the greatest engines GM has ever put into production. It does not rumble in the traditional Corvette sense, it screams. It produces a high-pitched, ferocious sound that draws comparisons to exotic European machinery costing several times as much. And it sits behind the driver in a mid-engine configuration that transformed the Corvette's handling balance entirely, distributing weight in a way that the front-engine layout could never achieve. Now, some important context. That starting price of approximately $175,000 sounds like a significant sum, and it is. But consider what it represents in the broader landscape of 2026 performance cars. The Ferrari 296 GTB, which operates in a similar performance category, costs roughly 4 times as much. The Corvette ZR1 produces nearly double its power. That is not a straightforward comparison because Ferrari brings things to the table that go beyond raw performance metrics, and we will discuss one of those cars shortly. But as a statement of engineering intent, the value proposition of the ZR1 is almost impossible to process rationally. Is the interior the final word in luxury and material quality? No. Is the overall refinement of the experience going to match a German or Italian rival in the same price bracket? Probably not in every measurable way. But none of that matters when you are sitting behind the wheel of a mid-engine, 1,000-horsepower American sports car that costs a quarter of what a comparable exotic would command. The Corvette ZR1 is not simply a fast car, it is a declaration. It is General Motors standing at the center of a room full of the world's greatest automotive manufacturers and saying, clearly and without hesitation, we belong here. And in 2026, that argument is almost impossible to refute. Number 7. Porsche 718 Cayman GT3 RS. There are certain combinations of words in the automotive world that carry an almost Pavlovian response for serious enthusiasts. Porsche, Cayman, GT3 RS. Say them in sequence to anyone who genuinely loves driving, and watch what happens to their expression. The GT3 RS is perhaps the most universally praised sports car in modern automotive journalism, which is a remarkable achievement in an era of polarized opinions and endless hot takes. Automotive writers, who as a professional class rarely agree on anything more complicated than traffic laws, find extraordinary consensus around this car. It is, in the view of nearly everyone who has driven it properly, something close to perfect. The naturally aspirated 4.0-liter flat-six engine sits in the middle of the car and revs freely, urgently, and dramatically all the way to 9,000 RPM. The sound it produces at full throttle is one of the great sensory experiences available in a road car, a high-frequency, layered, gloriously mechanical shriek that sounds, as one memorable description put it, like an angry wasp trapped inside a cathedral. It is the kind of sound that makes you look for reasons to hold gears longer than strictly necessary. For 2026, Porsche has applied further refinement to an already exceptional recipe. The aerodynamics have been revised to generate additional downforce without meaningfully compromising drag. The PDK transmission has been recalibrated for even faster shifts, squeezing additional performance from gear changes that were already impressively rapid. And in keeping with Porsche's relentless pursuit of mass reduction, rumors point to a further 20 kilograms stripped from the structure through intelligent application of carbon fiber and thinner glazing. But here is what separates the GT3 RS from many of its competitors, and why it sits so firmly in the hearts of people who love driving. It communicates. At 7/10 of its capability, well within the reach of any competent driver in normal road conditions, this car is already talking to you constantly. Information flows through the steering wheel, through the seat, through the brake pedal. It tells you exactly where the grip is, exactly how much weight is on each corner, exactly how close you are to the limit. It is as analog an experience as you can have in a modern performance car. At around $160,000, every penny feels justified. Number 6. Aston Martin Vantage. Some cars are fast, some cars are capable. Some cars are efficient, or technologically advanced, or meticulously engineered down to the last gram. And then there are cars that make you feel something entirely different, cars that tap into a more emotional frequency, that make you understand, on a level that goes beyond performance metrics, why human beings developed such an intense relationship with the automobile in the first place. The 2026 Aston Martin Vantage is that kind of car. The powertrain story is straightforward and excellent. Mercedes-AMG's hand-built 4.0-liter twin-turbocharged V8, tuned here to a muscular 656 horsepower, a meaningful increase over the previous generation, sends its output through an 8-speed transaxle mounted at the rear axle. That rear-mounted transmission is not just a technical detail. It is a fundamental part of the driving experience, contributing to a weight distribution that makes the Vantage feel beautifully balanced and intuitively responsive in a way that front-heavy configurations simply cannot replicate. The sound that engine produces at idle is worth discussing separately. There is a particular quality to a well-tuned, naturally expressive V8 at low revs, a deep, authoritative, almost conversational burble that carries genuine drama without resorting to artificial amplification. The Vantage has that quality in abundance. Starting the engine is not a neutral act, it is an event. And then there is the way the car looks. The proportions are genuinely, classically beautiful in a way that is increasingly rare in an era where aggressive design has sometimes crossed the line into visual noise. The long hood stretches out ahead of the driver in the grand touring tradition. The rear deck is tight and purposeful. The wide rear haunches communicate power without resorting to theatrical exaggeration. It looks like the work of people who not only understand cars technically but genuinely love them aesthetically. At approximately $185,000, you are not purchasing transportation. You are purchasing a feeling, a statement, and a daily reminder that some things are still worth doing beautifully. Number 5. McLaren Artura II. The original McLaren Artura was a car with brilliant ideas at its core and some significant execution challenges surrounding them. It arrived in a complicated period for McLaren as a company, and while the fundamental architecture, a lightweight carbon monocoque, a hybrid twin-turbocharged V6 powertrain, a chassis tuned for supernatural agility, was genuinely exciting, the overall package did not fully deliver on its extraordinary promise. McLaren heard the criticism, they absorbed the feedback, and then they built the Artura II. Total system output now exceeds 700 horsepower, drawn from the twin-turbo V6 and an upgraded electric motor working in seamless coordination. The electric component provides immediate, ferocious torque from the moment the throttle opens, launching the car with a violence that feels almost indecent. As vehicle speed builds and the electric motor's contribution naturally evolves, the combustion engine takes over the character of the power delivery. The transition between the two is genuinely imperceptible. There is no lurch, no hesitation, no moment where the powertrain feels uncertain about what it is doing. It simply accelerates, continuously and relentlessly. The numbers are spectacular. 0 to 60 miles per hour in 2.7 seconds. A top speed exceeding 205 miles per hour. A curb weight of approximately 3,200 pounds, lighter than a Porsche 911 Turbo S, which is a remarkable achievement for a hybrid performance car with this level of equipment. But the real conversation around the Artura II centers on its chassis. McLaren's carbon fiber monocoque architecture remains the benchmark for structural rigidity combined with minimal mass, and the result is a car that changes direction with an almost unsettling immediacy. You think it, and the car does it. The response time between driver input and vehicle reaction is compressed to the point where the car feels like an extension of the driver's nervous system rather than a separate mechanical object. At around $280,000, the Artura II undercuts Ferrari and Lamborghini while presenting a credible argument for matching or exceeding them in pure dynamic performance. That value proposition, if we can use that term at this price level, is precisely the McLaren philosophy, and in the Artura II, it is finally being executed as it was always intended. Number 4. Ferrari 296 Specially. When Ferrari engineers look at one of their existing models and ask themselves how they would make it more extreme, more focused, and more demanding to drive at the limit, the result is always something special. The Specially treatment, Ferrari's designation for the most performance-oriented version of a given platform, has produced some of the most celebrated drivers' cars in the manufacturer's history. The 458 Specially, the 488 Pista. Each one took an already exceptional foundation and transformed it into something that felt like it had been developed specifically for drivers who want more of everything. The 296 Specially follows that lineage and, by all available evidence, elevates it. The plug-in hybrid V6 powertrain, already impressive in the standard 296 GTB, has been developed further to produce approximately 830 combined horsepower. Weight has been aggressively reduced throughout the car through extensive use of carbon fiber components and titanium fasteners in areas where steel would previously have been standard. The chassis has been recalibrated specifically for what Ferrari's own materials described as the most demanding drivers, a phrase that, in the context of a 296 especially, implies someone who is genuinely operating at the outer margins of what a road car can be asked to do. The result is sharper, louder, more physically intense than the standard car in every dimension that matters to a driver who takes the craft of driving seriously. The steering communicates more urgently, the brakes respond with greater immediacy. The body control in high-speed direction changes feels almost preternaturally composed for a car generating this level of cornering force. At approximately $395,000, Ferrari is pricing the 296 specially as a work of art, and the company would accept that description without embarrassment. Here is the thing. When you spend time with a car that has been developed to this level of completeness, that perspective becomes harder to dismiss. Whether or not you can justify the number, it is very difficult to argue that Ferrari has not created something genuinely extraordinary. Number 3. Lamborghini Temerario. The Huracan was, by any reasonable measure, one of the most successful and beloved sports cars of its generation. Its naturally aspirated V10 engine, howling, theatrical, mechanical in a way that made even jaded automotive professionals stop and listen to find what a mid-engine Lamborghini was supposed to sound like and feel like. Replacing it was always going to be a significant moment. Lamborghini decided to make it a defining one. The Temerario does not attempt to replicate the Huracan formula with different numbers. It reimagines what a Lamborghini can be in 2026. The V10 has been replaced by a twin-turbocharged 4.0-liter V8, which represents a fundamental change in character. But Lamborghini's engineers were not content to simply swap one combustion engine for another. They paired that V8 with 3 electric motors, one integrated into the transmission and one dedicated to each front wheel, for a total system output approaching 900 horsepower and a level of torque vectoring sophistication that borders on science fiction. Each front wheel receiving independently controlled torque means the Temerario can manipulate its cornering behavior with extraordinary precision. The car can effectively rotate around its own axis mid-corner, adjusting the power sent to each wheel in real time to achieve cornering trajectories that would be physically impossible to replicate through conventional means. It sounds technical because it is, but the experience from the driver's seat is intuitive and visceral rather than clinical. The technology disappears, and what remains is the sensation of a car that simply goes where you point it with complete and slightly frightening commitment. The design, as you would expect from Lamborghini, demands attention. The Temerario looks like the product of a collaboration between an aerospace engineer and someone who genuinely believes that subtlety is overrated. Every surface has a purpose. Every line communicates aggression and forward motion even when the car is standing still. Starting at around $300,000, the Temerario represents Lamborghini's vision of where sports cars go from here. It is ambitious, technologically sophisticated, and completely, unapologetically itself. Number 2. Porsche 911 GT3 RS. There are benchmarks in every field of human endeavor, reference points that define a standard against which everything else is measured. In the world of naturally aspirated, road-legal sports cars intended for serious track use, the Porsche 911 GT3 RS is that benchmark, has been for years. Still is in 2026. The 992.2 generation brings refinements to an already devastatingly effective formula. The 4.0-liter flat-six remains naturally aspirated, a deliberate and philosophically important decision in an era of increasingly widespread forced induction, and still spins freely to 9,000 RPM, producing approximately 525 horsepower with a linear, responsive quality that turbocharged engines fundamentally cannot replicate. There is no lag, no surge, no artificial drama at a specific point in the rev range. The power builds with perfect, predictable consistency from idle to the red line. The real development story of the 992.2 GT3 RS lies in the aerodynamics and chassis technology. The active DRS system on the rear wing, which opens to reduce drag on straights and closes to generate downforce under braking and cornering, now operates in conjunction with ground effect underbody tunnels developed directly from Porsche's Le Mans racing program. The result is more total downforce than any previous GT3 RS, achieved without the drag penalty that stationary aerodynamic devices inevitably impose. It is proper, meaningful racing technology applied to a road car. Here is the simplest way to convey what this car means in the sports car world. When any manufacturer develops a new performance car and wants to understand where it stands in the competitive landscape, they take it to the Nürburgring Nordschleife and compare its lap time to the GT3 RS. That single fact communicates more about the car's status than any description could. It is the standard, a waiting list that extends well beyond immediate availability, a price around $250,000 that represents extraordinary value for what you receive, and a driving experience that, in the considered opinion of virtually everyone who has experienced it fully, qualifies as one of the greatest the automotive world has ever produced. Number 1. Porsche 918 successor. In 2013, the Porsche 918 Spider arrived and did something that very few cars in history have managed. It genuinely changed the conversation about what was possible. It broke the Nürburgring Nordschleife lap record for production cars. It demonstrated that hybrid technology was not a compromise forced upon sports cars by regulatory pressure but a genuine performance tool that could produce something faster, more capable, and more exciting than pure combustion alone. It was a masterpiece of engineering intent, and it announced Porsche's ambition in terms that the entire automotive world understood immediately. For 2026, Porsche has been developing its successor in near total secrecy. What has emerged from credible sources over time is staggering. The powertrain is reported to combine a twin-turbocharged V8 with an electric system derived from Porsche's Formula E program, technology developed in the most demanding, data-intensive competitive environment in motorsport. Total system output is rumored to exceed 1,200 horsepower. The structure is a full carbon monocoque, built to the highest specification Porsche's manufacturing capability can achieve. Active aerodynamics manage downforce and drag across all operating conditions. The weight target is reported to be under 3,100 pounds, an almost implausible figure for a car of this capability, and a figure that, if achieved, would represent a feat of engineering that most manufacturers could not contemplate. This is not simply a fast car. It is a statement of accumulated knowledge, everything Porsche has learned from decades at Le Mans, from its GT division, from Formula E, from building the world's most consistently excellent drivers' cars at every price point, distilled into a single machine designed to represent the absolute state-of-the-art in 2026, the price point, expected to exceed $1.5 million, and the extremely limited production numbers remove it from practical consideration for almost everyone. But that is not the point of a car like this. The point is what it represents, a manufacturer at the height of its powers, committing every resource it has to building the finest possible expression of what it knows and what it believes. The point is the ambition, the execution, and the legacy. The 918 Spider defined a moment in automotive history. Its successor intends to define another one. The standard is still being set, and the standard still belongs to Porsche. That's the list. 10 cars,